and welcome to the adventures of
Great.
and White.
So I'm Dave,
And I'm Kyla.
and we are here sharing our adventures as we move from kids in the home, dogs in the home, very, very busy lifestyle because we've got multiple jobs going on as far as running brokerages and running companies in the US to hopefully getting rid of all of that stuff and becoming empty nesters and retired. And one of the things that
Semi-retired.
semi-retired, yeah, I don't think we'll ever really retire, but doing things differently, I guess, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So the thing that we want to talk about today is where we want to end up,
Yes.
right? Our goals in the future on what is it that we want to do 5 years from now, 6 years from now, and how we're setting ourselves up now to be able to do that in the future.
Yes.
Right? So the first sort of idea that we wanted was that we wanted to be somewhere warmer than we live now.
Yes.
So we currently live in Ontario, Canada, where pretty much from November to May,
June this year,
the weather is less than desirable unless you like skiing and skating in the cold weather. Snowshoeing and snowmobiling, which I don't like any of those things. So we like warm weather.
Yes.
We like to be in a warm climate.
I love Florida in August. I just love it.
But we also want to be in the Eastern time zone.
That was another criteria.
Right? So we were looking at moving north-south in our adventures rather than east-west to Europe or European destinations. So
or Mexico on the West Coast or Arizona. We did look at all of those very carefully. Mm-hmm. But we did end up in Florida because of the time zone and also flights. Right. We're able to hop on a plane from several different airports that are all within 2-hour drive and get down to Florida in about 2 hours, not 3 hours, 3-hour plane ride. So about half a day travel.
Right. Rather than if we were going to the West Coast, it's basically a whole day. By the time you get to the airport, you fly 4 hours, 4.5 hours, and there's time zone changes or whatever. So you lose a day in travel that way, and coming back can be difficult with the time zone change too. So one of our criteria was that we wanted to be north-south and ease of access to our location. So we ended up in Central Florida, right? Yeah. And the area that we ended up in is called
The Villages.
The Villages, right? So The Villages is a master planned 55 plus community in Central Florida. You can look it up at thevillages.com, but we first looked at going to The Villages by watching YouTube videos.
Yes.
So what we're hoping is that this YouTube channel will also allow you to learn from us, just like we learned from people before us when we were watching different videos on YouTube about the villages in Florida. And that's where we ended up buying a house and
lifestyle, expenses,
how to negotiate a mortgage in the US, all those types of things. So we bought a house in the Villages, Florida in 2021.
Yes.
And that was the first property that we owned outside of Canada.
Yes.
Right? So let's talk a little bit about that experience. How did we go about finding the house and negotiating the financing and that type of thing?
So we did some work long before we purchased the house. So we went and got an RBC US account, not a US funds account, but an RBC US bank account.
Right.
And started developing a credit history in the US. We also got a credit card with it. Then we figured out who would be the mortgage company that RBC would refer to us to in the US, and we got pre-approval. So we had all of our documents ready and we were pre-approved before we even ventured into looking at any houses in Florida.
And why did you find it important to get that US bank account and the US credit? Why is that important to someone who wants to buy in the US?
Well, one of the hardest things is moving money. It's very difficult if you're Canadian to send money to the US.
Right.
So we can easily move money from our Canadian RBC account to our US RBC account, and then even into a Chase US bank account, where we can use Zelle and things that the US use. The Canadians are using e-transfer. Well, they don't have it in the US.
No, they don't have e-transfer.
And wires are very difficult and very expensive.
And we've been caught before when we had to put a deposit down and we sent the wire down to the US, but it didn't arrive in the time frame that we wanted it to arrive, mainly because of human error. The person that did the wire didn't press the right button, and 2 days went by before we realized that, oh, it hasn't come down. And that almost actually cost us our first property down in the US.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And it also gave us another charge. So it charged us to send the wire, and then the receiving company was charged twice because it had to go through 2 banks to get to theirs.
Right.
So we had sent an extra 40 and we were still short another 20.
So yeah, and that meant our deposit was light.
Right.
So our real estate agent in the Villages actually went over and gave them $20 or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
had to hand in a $20 bill.
Yeah, to even up our deposit to make sure everything went through okay.
Yes.
So that was in 2021. That was our first purchase. And that's
we had 60 days to close.
60 days to close.
And there is no budging on that 60 days. It is 60 days to close with the title company.
And in the Villages, we had to make sure that we had our financing in place with RBC at the time, Royal Bank.
Yep.
And it wasn't like I was working with an RBC Canada rep.
Oh, no.
We were working with a US rep who
was in Georgia.
It was in Georgia. And you'd think, oh, okay, you're working with RBC, you're working with RBC. That's not the case. The RBC US people have no discussion with the RBC Canada people. So,
or access to documents.
No access to documents. So the process was they would set up a portal and we would log into the portal, and whenever they asked for paperwork, we would load that document into the portal and they would review it.
Yes.
But that was a challenge because they kept asking for the same documents over and over again. And they didn't understand that when we sent money from Canada to the US, well, for instance, let's say our deposit was $10,000, we would have to send 13,000 Canadian dollars.
Yes, transfer 13,000 Canadian into the US account to end up with 10,000 US and then move that money down. They wanted to track all of the funds, and when it wasn't 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, they could not get their head wrapped around it.
So I remember at one point, like sitting in a Costco, talking to the RBC manager saying, just look at the transfer. It's Canadian to US, and there's a difference in the exchange rate. That's why it's not the same number. And that took half an hour to get through that, right? So there are definitely challenges for Canadians buying in the US. Now we do have, like my brother, for instance, he bought a house in the States, but he bought it with his home equity line of credit and he paid cash for it.
Yes.
So a different scenario. He didn't get any financing at all. It was easier for him.
He still had to open up a US bank account in Florida. And there is a few steps to manage all of that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was an interesting learning experience.
Yes.
One that we've sort of figured out.
No.
Basically step by step, right? It wasn't like we knew what we were doing. We had to go through the whole process, and there was some real anxiety involved in that. But we did close on it.
We did
close on it. And that was our first purchase in Florida.
Yes.
In 2021.
And we chose it also because of the lifestyle there. Mm-hmm. You can be as busy as you want to be, is the phrase that everyone uses, between swimming and golf and activities and social clubs and
pickleball. Yeah, pickleball. Don't forget pickleball.
Golf cart racing. No, just golf cart driving.
Yeah, exactly. Parades. Yeah.
Parades.
Yeah. Nightly entertainment and all the things that we want to have when we actually do retire.
Yes.
Like we don't see ourselves ever sitting on a porch in the rocking chairs, right? No. That's not us at all. We want to be busy, and we really lucked into finding the Villages down in the States, and that's where we want to be eventually.
Yes.
Right? So that's the goal. So that's our first foray into the United States, and next video we'll talk about
the second
into the United States and see how that goes. So thank you for joining us. We hope that you can subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you along for the ride.
Like us and send a comment in and tell us what you think and share your experiences with buying in the US if you've taken that step yet.
Yeah, that's awesome. So from the adventures of Gray
and Kyla White,
Thanks again.